Hello and welcome to the next video. In this video, we will be going over a login brute force. We can see the challenge page here. It says, try to brute force the admin user on the login page for this website. Additionally, it makes it a little bit easier, and it says, for simplicity, your word list can be the first 10 strings inside rocku.txt. Let's talk about rocku for a second. Rocku.txt, we can see, is 14 million lines long. If we're ever expected to do a brute force, for example, to crack a hash, to brute force a login page, etc., we're going to be always brute forcing with rocku.txt. That's because it wouldn't make sense to have the password in some obscure password list, because part of the challenge shouldn't be having to throw 5 different password lists at every login page. Rocku.txt is kind of like the standard file that we're always going to be using whenever we're brute forcing any kind of a password. All tutorials, guides, exams, if they require a brute force and it's not on rocku.txt, then it's a bad exam or it's a bad test. Now the file is quite big, so one thing that we're going to do is, instead of brute forcing with all 14 million lines, we're only going to be brute forcing with the first 10 lines, with the first 10 strings. We can use head, which is similar to cat, except for it will only show us the first 10 lines. And we see we have our first 10 lines. Now I'm going to output this to a file called little.txt. And I'm going to actually, so this is a protected folder, right? It's a system folder, it's not our home folder. So instead, I'm going to output this file to our home directory. Great. And we can see it's the first 10 lines. Now that we have our word list or a password list, and again, let's pretend that this is 14 million lines, not just 10. The theory is going to apply the same way, the same thing either way. Let's do our brute force. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do a failed login attempt on the admin account. So I'm just going to guess password. And we can see invalid username or password. By the way, you want to make sure for this login request that your burp Foxy proxy your burp is set to burp, and your burp is open, and your intercept is off. And we can see here our login request. I'm going to forward this to the repeater. We're just going to demonstrate. So we send our login request, and we get invalid username or password. A invalid login request has invalid username or password, whereas a valid login request, as we've seen earlier, has a redirect to the home page, and presumably also a different file size because it's not loading this text. Let's practice using the Intruder tool inside of Burp Suite. So we can right click on our repeater, and we can click Send to Intruder. We can then go to the Intruder tab. Sometimes when this opens, there'll be some highlighted text. Go ahead and just click clear if you have that. And we can see nothing's highlighted right now. Highlight our password guess. Click add position. Then we're going to go to payloads. And we're going to click load. And we're going to load that little password list we made a moment ago. This position tells Burp where to cycle through the different password entries. For example, it'll try 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it'll keep going, and it will keep track of how big or the specific size of each of the replies. We can see when it's an invalid login, we see it's 1957 bytes. The number is always the same. 1957 bytes. So we have our position set. We have our word list uploaded. Next, let's talk about the resource pool. Websites will generally give you problems if you're going to slam it with 100 requests a second. what I'm going to demonstrate is how we can use a resource pool. So we're going to click Create New Resource Pool. I'm going to name it Slow Down. And I'm going to set it to 1 concurrent request with a delay of 500 milliseconds or half a second between requests. And we could have random variations that might help bypass certain firewalls. Certain firewalls might notice if we send a request every half a second specifically, because that's not very human-like, right? Humans aren't going to be sending a request every half a second on the millisecond. So sometimes random variations can help. For now, we're just going to leave it fixed. And it's going to cycle through all of our different password attempts and show us the length of the response. You can see when it doesn't have a valid password, it's always displaying that invalid username or password. Oh, but we see this one has a different response. It's a 302 redirect response. The location header, it sets a redirection. So 302 found redirect, whereas the other ones are 200 OK and have a different length. We see the payload, or the password it tried for this one, was ABC123. There's a good chance, more than good actually, the highly likely chance, that this is going to be the login. And we see, congratulations, you're signed in as admin. And we have the flag. I hope this video was informative. There will be a brief exam after this video. I hope that you do well on that exam, and I will see you in the next video. Cheers!